Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, podcast number 61 and number 2 in Season 3. As always, I am happy that you are taking time to listen to the podcast, and if this is your first time, welcome. I want you to know there are 60 great past podcasts with some of the greats in our profession, and I hope you will take time to enjoy them. You know, band directing is an incredible profession, and along the way, we get to meet some of the neatest people who have an immense talent, people who have an incredible passion for music, for bands, for people, for teaching. It is truly astounding. We are so lucky. And on today's podcast, I am honored and excited to bring you a conversation with another incredible treasure of our band world. When you listen to the introduction of this podcast, you hear this incredible fanfare, which leads to a wonderful composition titled Gloriana, and it was written by today's guest, Jay Bocook. I had the pleasure of meeting Jay over 40 years ago, and our paths cross from time to time, and every time they do, we recall a few laughs from those early days of judging a marching band contest together or being at an event. As you will hear, Jay is one of the most down-to-earth people you will ever meet. Throughout his career, he has produced hundreds of compositions and arrangements. And during our conversation, you will hear him give sage advice to anyone who is aspiring to become an arranger or composer. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Jay Bocook, and I'll bring that to you right after I say thank you to one of my sponsors, Hal Leonard Corporation, publisher of the Essential Elements Method for Band.
Today's podcast is made possible through the support of Hal Leonard, publisher of the Essential Elements Method for Band and the Essential Elements interactive website that is free for Essential Elements users. Essential Elements Interactive, or EEI, is a state-of-the-art, cloud-based support program that is constantly evolving to provide you and your students with more information and resources to help them learn and have fun while doing so. To learn more about EEI, visit EssentialElementsInteractive.com.
Well, I've been wanting to get our next guest on the podcast for quite a while, and I've just been negligent in doing so, and I just was going down my list of people that I wanted to get, and his name popped up, and I said, man, I have got to do this. And if you don't know this name, you are obviously not in the music world, not a band director. And in addition to being a wonderful composer and arranger, he is also the man who wrote the theme music for my podcast, Gloriana. And he is none other than the legendary Jay Bocook. Jay, welcome.
Hey, Charlie, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Everything we do together is fun, buddy.
That's been true for 40 years, isn't it?
We'll talk about a little bit of that here as we get
okay.
going.
All right.
Yeah. So thanks for writing this great piece, Gloriana. I guess that was done for Furman.
It was for the inauguration of the first woman president at Furman University. And they wanted a new piece for a new era, for a new everything. And her name was Elizabeth Davis. So the piece goes back to the kind of Elizabeth I and then the whole uh, all the stuff around that. So yeah, it's kind of in that vein, and it was great on the day that it happened, the pomp and circumstance, and I'm glad it works out for your show.
It's great. I appreciate it. Well, we got a lot of ground to cover in the next couple of minutes, but like I do with most of my guests, I like to let the listeners know a little bit more about like where you grew up and how music became a part of your life.
Yeah. Well, most of my childhood growing up was in Largo, Florida. It's where I went to high school and middle school. Well, junior high, actually, it was called back in those days. And that's really where I got my start. I started playing saxophone in beginning band because my dad played the sax and arranged and had his own big band for a while, but became an aerospace engineer and kind of got out of music. But we had a saxophone. So that's what I played. And I was so excited the first day I ever got to play it. And I kind of knew from that day on, I'd done sports and everything else, but I kind of knew from that day on I was going to be involved in music forever. I didn't know how I knew, but I knew. And sure enough, that's come true.
So Largo High School, that was Bob Cotter and the Band of Gold, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, I was there at the very beginning of that. He took over. There was a teacher strike in Florida at that time. And so he just came in from the business sector because he did have a teaching music ed degree, even though he'd been in business otherwise. And he came in just to do it part-time in the middle of the year during this teacher strike and stayed on and started this Band of Gold. And my first year was the following fall. So I was there at the very beginning of it. I watched it grow and happen and turn into the magnificent program that it was. And I stayed on as kind of an assistant on the staff for several years during all the summer stuff when they would go to Europe and, compete in Kirkrada, Holland, and all these events that they would do. I stayed close to the program most of the time that Bob Cotter was there.
That was an amazing program. I mean, that's way pre Bands of America and all that stuff. But boy, that was one of the great programs in the country at the time.
Yeah, it was, I call that the super band era, where you'd find a band like that, maybe one in a few states, and every now and then they might have a chance to get together and compete. And that would usually happen at the Festival of States in St. Petersburg, was where you would see that happen. This is before BOA and all that, and that was definitely one of those programs. And it was fun to be a part of. It was fun to see it happen. And just amazing. And it had a huge influence on my musical life as a budding music educator and arranger.
So what made you choose Furman, Jay?
Well, I grew up in Florida, like I said. I kind of wanted to get out of the state. I kind of wanted to go somewhere where there were seasons. And so I applied at several places, not in Florida, in Ohio and Alabama and a couple other places. And I was in my guidance counselor's office one day, and there was a postcard of Furman on his desk. And I said, "What's this place?" And he said, "It's a small private school in Greenville, South Carolina." And I had cousins that lived in Greenville, South Carolina. He looked at me and said, "But don't look at that. You can't get in there." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, you don't have the grades to get in that place. But somehow it turned out through whatever and auditions that I did get in. And just the fact that, he said I couldn't get in there made me really want to go there. And it was
what the hell is it about high school guidance counselors always telling kids that are like really good in band and music going like, "Well, shit, you're never going to make it at that school. You need to go into auto mechanics or something like that." I mean, what the hell's up with those people?
I know. I to this day, I was just flabbergasted when he said, "Don't even look at that. You can't get in." And okay, maybe I wasn't the greatest high school student, but it's because it was high school and I did band. I didn't do all the other stuff very well, but I did get in and had a very successful career, time at Furman. It was a great place for me to go. The size was just right. The atmosphere, the time was right where we were in the music world, in the band world. It was just the right place at the right time for sure.
And the band director there at the time was Dan Ellis.
That's right. Great mentor. He really made that program, brought it to life, made it the premier, even at a small school during his years, made it the premier band program in South Carolina. And the best part is this is a time, Charlie, if you remember, in the 70s when styles were changing in band. We were going from pageantry to more of a drum corps style. And he didn't really know how to do that. And I had come from Largo, who did know how to do that. And so when I got there, he said, look, can you help me turn this thing into a more contemporary experience, for what we're doing. So basically my last couple of years at Furman, I kind of ran the marching band just because he didn't understand the drum corps style. And I'd come from that style. So I was writing the charts for the band and writing the drill, whatever that was. Not very good. I was much better at the music side, but yeah, it just gave me a chance to, and basically run rehearsals and do everything. So Dan Ellis was a pioneer in recognizing in his students what they could do to enhance the program and allow them the freedom to do that. And without that, I kind of cut my teeth on learning how to write for, just doing that.
So were you writing in high school, or did you start writing at Furman?
No, I started writing in high school. Bob Cotter Jr., who's also a famous, well-known arranger to this day. Bob Cotter Jr., his son, was at Florida State at the time, and he was writing charts for the Largo band. And it's one of those where I started talking to him one day, and, I never realized that people that wrote music were still alive. I thought they were all gone. We just kind of figured that, like, oh, and this guy's actually the one that's writing our music is in this room right now. And that blew me away. That fascinated me. So I started talking to him, and he gave me some pointers. He was studying with Charlie Carter at Florida State at that time. And so I started writing a little bit in high school. Not good, but, a start. And I was also playing in a rock and roll band, and we were doing Chicago and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So I was transcribing those charts for the brass section or for the winds in my rock band. So it was all those things going on at the same time. But it really wasn't until I got to Furman where Dan Ellis said, look, write us a show, the whole show, and that's where we started. So now it wasn't just a fun thing. I had to get it done because we were going to perform it.
So what was the next step after Furman for you? Was it Northeast Louisiana, or did you go start teaching?
No, it was Northeast Louisiana. I was drum major of the Furman band. We did an exhibition at the South Carolina Championship. Jack White, who was the band director in Northeast Louisiana, was a judge. He saw the Furman band in exhibition, heard the music, and said, who wrote that music? And Dan Ellis told him, well, my drum major did. And he goes, well, does he need a place to go to grad school? And so we chatted, and I said, yes, I would have never considered that school. But he offered, the band was fantastic at that time at Northeast Louisiana. Unbelievable group, could play anything. And his offers, come down and be a graduate assistant and just write charts for the marching band and get paid and get your degree, and so forth. So that's what I did. And that's really where the writing started, because that was my only job, really, was to write music for the marching band. His band, again, not unlike Dan Ellis, who gave me free rein. Jack White was very stern about how the program was going to go, and he knew exactly what he wanted, but he also knew he was a little bit out of date, and he knew I was doing this new style stuff. And so he let me do it a little bit at first, and then it got a little more, and then a little more. And finally he said, yeah, this is the way we need to be going. And I was writing everything for them. And actually, that's how I got into the publishing world, Charlie, is we made record albums back in the day for recruiting purposes. Bands still do that, but they don't do record albums. But we would do an album of the marching band and give a copy to every band director in Louisiana and Arkansas and whatever. And they heard these charts, and they would go to the music stores and say, I want to buy these. And the music store people would go, these aren't published. And they then, Ted Frank Music in New Orleans, a very influential dealer, Ted Frank Music called several publishers and said, look, there's this kid out here writing this stuff that these band directors want to buy, and nobody's published it. Somebody needs to grab this kid up and let him publish for their company, because I'm getting lots of requests for it. And maybe this leads to another question, but there was a brand new company at that time, Jensen Publications, that had just started 6 months before, only had 2 arrangers. John Higgins and Warren Barker were the only 2 arrangers. Nothing bad, huh? But those are the only 2 arrangers they had. And they didn't have a dedicated marching band guy. So John Higgins heard the record of my stuff and called up and said, I don't even want you to send it to me so I can look at it. I've heard it. We want to hire you exclusively to write whatever it was, 5 charts a year. And we'll pay you in advance of royalties of whatever it was. And at that time, now I was a first-year teacher. So the fact of a few more dollars was spectacular, a month coming in. So I immediately said yes. So I kind of, like most people do, got in the back door, probably all the wrong way to do it. But that's the way it happens, It's just the way it happens. Other people champion your music, and then people come after you to want you to be a part of their. And that was in 1977, and I've remained on an exclusive contract with them, with Jensen, now Hal Leonard, ever since. So
that's amazing. But Jack White was one of the real legends in the old marching band world, the old Sound of Today marching band.
That's right.
You were the sound of today. You were the sound of yesterday, and you are the sound of today, Jay Bocook.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that, but it was quite the program. There was an influx of money because of natural gas at that time into Louisiana schools. So basically, anybody that could sign an X could get in the school and play in the band, and the whole semester was paid for. So we had people from New York City. We had people from all over the place in this band in Monroe, Louisiana. It was unbelievable talent, and so I could write anything I wanted, and they could play it, and they're magnificent. Unfortunately, later the natural gas thing dried up, and the Louisiana schools got hit with some real, shortfalls money-wise, and they're still trying to recover from that. And of course, the school has changed names now to the University of Louisiana Monroe, but and they're rebuilding. But it was back in the late 70s, early 80s, that band was fantastic.
So you mentioned when Higgins signed you for Jensen, you were starting to teach. Was that at Travelers Rest?
Yes, it was.
And how'd you get there?
Well, Charlie, really what I wanted to be in college, even though I was writing music, I wanted to be a band director. I wanted to be like my high school band director and create a magnificent band program that could, be competitive both on the stage and on the field. And that's what he did. And I wanted to do that. So I wanted to teach. And of course, I went back to my mentor at Furman, Dan Ellis, in Greenville, South Carolina, and said, what jobs are available around there? I thought that was more desirable than staying in Louisiana or going back to Florida. I really had such a great experience in Greenville, South Carolina. And Dan Ellis, he looked around and he said, here's a couple of jobs you can look at. And one was at Travelers Rest, which is right out the back gate of Furman. His kids went there to school. They had not a big tradition of success in the band field, but they had a lot of good kids. They had all the Furman faculty kids went to Travelers Rest High School. And, I really wanted a job that was in Rock Hill, South Carolina, a more established program, but I was a first year teacher and I didn't get the job and I was brokenhearted. But the principal at Travelers Rest said, kid, we'll give you a shot. And they hired me. And so, so that's where I was. And I had Furman's resources to help me. I had a lot of good kids in that band and they got good very quickly. It didn't take long at all for that band to really turn around because, like I said, those Furman faculty kids were in there. They weren't just mountain kids. There was a lot of well-off kids in there as well.
Yeah, and you led them to a state championship in South Carolina and a whole bunch of cool stuff, huh?
Yep. Yeah, no, like I said, they got good very quickly, and they were great, like I said, on the stage and on the field. And I was having the time of my life. They got better and better and better. My last year, we were second place at the Festival of States. I don't know if you know that story.
Oh, yeah. The Festival of States, or that you were second place?
We were second place. Festival of States was the show to go to in the country. And we weren't predicted to do very well because it was one of those banner years where every great band in the country happened to be there. Falls Church from Virginia was there. Freddie Martin's last year at South Cobb was there. Bob Cotter's last year at Largo High School, they were there. West Genesee, New York, Bruce Burritt. I mean, these are legends. These are legendary band programs. Wilson, Pennsylvania, and on and on. And we ended up being second in that show. It was to West Genesee, and it was the greatest thrill of my life.
Go ahead.
Well, but then, just to complete the story, I get a call during that last semester from Jensen Publications, the people from John Higgins in Milwaukee. And he's saying, our concert band director is our director of band publications is John Edmondson, a very well known, as you know, composer. And he's leaving us to start his own company in Arizona with his wife, Ann McGinty. And we're stuck. We don't have anybody to be the director of band publications at this time. After 2 years, the largest band print company there was. So I'm 27 years old, having the best time of my life with my band, but then how do you say no to this? So of course I left Traveler's Rest to go be the director of band publications in Milwaukee of Jensen Publications, and did that for 2 years. And that was game changing for me, because that's for those directors that listen to you. Those are the glory days of marching band, when the albums would come out and you'd wait at the mailbox for them to come out, and live recordings happened, and the state of the art series and all that stuff. We developed all that in those couple of years I was there at Jensen. I had an absolutely great time. I missed teaching like crazy, but I was writing, which was fantastic. And I was able to sit every day next to John Higgins and Paul Jennings and just work with them. It's two of the greatest arrangers ever in the band world. We just lost Paul Jennings. I know.
Yes.
You know. Yeah. Very sad. But in those days, we would just go to a conference room and we'd have lunch together every day. We'd play stuff on the piano for each other. I learned more from John Higgins just at lunchtime than I ever learned doing anything. Very formative in terms of my writing. All of a sudden, stuff that I was doing, I didn't know why it worked. Now he explained why it worked and it made sense, and I didn't have to reinvent it. It was a fantastic time. It was a great time.
Yeah, and for the people that don't know about John Higgins, he was William D. Ravelli's staff arranger at the University of Michigan at age 18 or something like that?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, he's pretty big talent. So you stayed at Jensen, but then you went back to Furman as director of bands.
Well, Dan Ellis called me after 2 years and said, I'm going to step down from being director of bands. I'm going to stay on and coordinate music education. Would you come back and be the director of bands? So, wow, I go from a high school band director that didn't want to leave, but into this thing with publications where I couldn't say no, had a fantastic success there. And after 2 years, things were just really starting to happen. And now my alma mater is asking me if I want to come back and be the director of bands. I still had the energy to teach. I couldn't say no, so I did. So I left Milwaukee and the snow. Being from Florida, that was quite a change to get used to, and went back and became director of bands at Furman University. And of course, I was still writing for Jensen this whole time, still doing everything. But now I had a chance to use my band at Furman as one of the recording bands they would use for the live recordings of the marching band stuff, which helped Furman a good bit. It was great. It was a great experience. And that worked fantastic for 7 years until things really started to change in the writing world, where people wanted their own special shows. BOA was happening now. I was getting lots and lots and lots of requests to write shows. And I decided I'd try to leave teaching and just be a freelance arranger composer after 7 years of doing the band at Furman. So I left and did that for 11 years. I was just a freelance arranger, exclusive with Jensen, but I was still writing marching band shows for, some high profile programs. And it was a very interesting time in my life, but it was great. I was able to make it financially because Jensen was allowing me to write as many arrangements as I wanted to. I was doing 3 or 4 a month, really kind of cranking them out during those days. And so I was able to make that work, still doing guest conducting things and whatever. Then after 11 years of doing that, Furman calls me back and said, would you come back? Would you come back and be the athletic director of bands? We have a director of bands now, but we don't have, and we need to start an athletic director of bands program. Would you come back and do that? And I said, well, as long as I still have time in my schedule to do the writing that I want to do and the clinicking that I want to do and so forth. So we created a position that made that work. And I've done that for the last 22 years. And this is the last year.
So you're still doing athletic bands at Furman?
No, I'm not. This is the first year that I decided to let that go. But I stayed on to do the composition, stay in the composition department and work with the composers. That's what I'm doing. And then I'm retiring at the end of this semester. So I was athletic director of bands for 22 years and now head of the composition department for this last year until they can find somebody new.
Wow. So during that time, you had one of your big hits, España. What year was that? Was that 78 or 79?
That was the first year. That was 78. And to my surprise, it's like my first year. And one of the first 3 pieces I ever did for Jensen Publications was this. Well, as we all know, the whole Spanish opener model was huge back in those days. And that piece is just a little of this, a little of that, a little of this, a little sauce, and boom, España comes out. And it just went nuts. It was just the exact right piece at the exact right time. It's that simple. Bands were looking for this new core style in an arrangement that was playable. Some of the stuff that had come up before was just too hard. This was playable, and people went crazy buying that chart.
Well, I remember meeting you in passing at a Bands of America event back when they had it in Whitewater, Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah.
And you were there. And I remember you walked in and somebody didn't say, hi, Jay. They started singing España to you.
I don't remember that. That was a long time ago. And I didn't realize how fortunate I was back then. I just figured it would always be that way, but I was very fortunate, incredibly fortunate to be in the right place at the right time with the right product. I'm just lucky that I've been able to continue to do it for all these years later,
So you're still judging marching bands?
I still do some. I used to do a whole lot, but once I started writing a lot of shows, it was hard for, a lot of your other people that you talk to, I'm sure, like this, Dick Saucedo and others, that like, I probably have a band that I've written for in the show, so I can't judge. So I don't do as much of that as I used to, because I might have a band that's going to be competing, and that's conflict of interest and shouldn't do that. But I still do some judging. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier about the Festival Parade of States, and the guy running it was Herb Melanie, who we both know, and we lost him a couple of years ago. And Herb was setting up like contests all around the country. He was like working with people, say, I can put together a marching band contest for you. And I happen to remember a great judging gig that Bob Buckner and you and I were on with the late, great Herb Melanie in El Paso, Texas.
Oh yeah. And, the Sun Bowl tournament. Yep.
Yes. And it started snowing at the Sun Bowl.
And it was odd because it was 2 weeks before the game. The tournament was 2 weeks before the game, but that's the way it was. And it was a community event. It wasn't a commercial event. And that was what Herb's specialty was. He got communities involved. The Rose Parade is that way. It's the Pasadena community. And I love that about it. It's not commercial. And this El Paso event was that way. I remember getting off the plane, and before you could get into the terminal, Herb was there with some city officials and a platter of margaritas for us. It's just like, and now we're off. Here we go.
And the one thing with Herb Melanie was you did not get paid as a judge.
That's right.
You got gifts.
That's right.
You still have your boots?
I do. I did that gig 2 years, and so I got 2 different pairs of boots.
Tony Lama boots.
Tony Lama, which I think is gone now. But
was that right?
I think. But yeah, at the time they were the finest boots in the world, and the factory was there, and they just take the judges out to the factory and say, pick out any pair of boots you want. If you want those rattleskin boots that are $3,000, that's fine. And that was kind of your gift, and they would take care of you. We would hobnob with all the celebrities in the parade. I remember hanging out with the astronauts that had walked on the moon. We're like hanging out and having breakfast with these guys. I mean, that was your payment with Herb. He was going to make it the experience of a lifetime.
And how about that plane ride that we had together from El Paso, Texas to Fort Lauderdale, Florida?
Yeah. Before I even answer that, I don't know if you remember what else happened.
Oh, yes, I do. We all got on the plane and we talked about the winning band we all had this band in first place. Is that what you're talking about?
No, mine is much more mundane. We were in the airport in El Paso getting ready to leave, sitting in the bar when Doug Flutie threw the famous pass.
Oh, that's right.
That famous pass that still lives today. I guess they beat Miami on the Hail Mary that beat Miami.
That was Boston College he was playing for.
That's right. And we were all together sitting in the El Paso bar waiting to get on the plane when that happened.
Yeah, well, I remember being on the plane and we were comparing notes because we had left before they announced awards, and we all had this one band in first place, and we said, oh, they're going to win the band. And one judge who is going to remain nameless comes on and goes, how about this band that won the contest? And like, they didn't win. Oh, yes, they did. Well, we come to find out that he gave them like 2,000 points in a 20-point category. And then he gave the other band like a -40. And he threw the whole contest. It was.
Well, but the best part of that trip was on the flight. It was a late night flight.
Yes.
Like, didn't get into Fort Lauderdale till well after midnight. And there was nobody on it except the judges, us.
There was a lady behind me.
And one other lady, and they let us all move up to first class. I don't know if you remember that. They said, if there's only 8 people on this plane, you can all come sit in first class. So we did. And at that time, Walkmans, which a lot of your listeners aren't even going to know what they are, but Walkmans are a cassette radio thing in stereo that were brand new and could offer hi-fi with headphones that were all of a sudden they sounded great. It wasn't just a handheld cassette recorder. It was hi-fi. You had some setup and you had some speakers that you plugged into it. Mm-hmm. And we got going on this flight. And I remember you opening the overhead bins and putting one speaker in one overhead bin and one speaker in another overhead bin with wires hanging down and playing a brand new Maynard Ferguson. Wasn't that who it was?
Yeah.
A brand new Maynard Ferguson album. It's just screaming, and we got it cranked up on the plane while we're flying. And this one lady, now remember, it's just the judges and this one lady. And she complains about the noise, Charlie. And you looked at her and said, ma'am, it's a big plane. And that was it. Like, move on back. If you don't like it, move on back. Oh, we would have been thrown off the plane and never allowed to fly again if that had happened today. But.
Oh, that's great. That is great. Well, we better get back to business here, Jay. Because otherwise we're probably going to both get arrested if we keep talking about that plane ride. So do you have a fairly set writing schedule that you follow?
You kind of have to. I found out over the years that you got to treat it like it's an everyday job. To be successful. Now, There are days that I don't. But when the heat is on, you got to get up, put on your suit, and go to work. And I don't mean that literally, but the same kind of attitude of if you went up and went into an office. Otherwise, you just sit on the couch all day. And I found that out when I first started writing full time. I think I sat on the couch for 6 months and said, I got to do something about this. So finally, I just started treating it like an everyday job. And that's the way I handle it now. This is my studio, kind of my sanctuary. It's soundproof from the rest of the house, so it doesn't bother Jana and anybody else who might be over here. And I can go to work and treat it as my office and not just as a hobby, if you will.
Do you have a goal in terms of a number of arrangements, compositions you do annually?
No, I've gotten to the point where it comes down to a feeling of what you think you can do in terms of where you are in your life. I can't write as much as I did when I was in my 20s and 30s, but I still love it. I still want to make sure that I do that, but I don't go, I'm going to do, some composers and arrangers do this. They'll go, I'm going to write 3 arrangements a month and crank it out like that. And I did that for a while with arranging pop tunes for Jensen and Hal Leonard, but I'm doing mainly composition now, compositions, and those take more time. So I kind of go, I can't really do more than 2 or 3 of those a year because, they take a pretty good block of time. Sometimes things come out quick, but they're certainly not like writing an arrangement where you can turn it around because the music is already there. You just embellishing it and adding your thing to it. Composing, it's all you. So you have no one to blame but yourself. So it's going to take more time in my mind.
So let's talk about the process for a second. So what's the germ that starts everything in motion for you? Is it a sound, a note grouping? Is it a chord, an idea, a picture? What's that germ?
Well, it's different for different pieces. I think a lot of times, if I'm doing a commission for somebody like I am now, getting ready to do, I like to find out about the area of where they live in the country, what's native to them, what's specific, what flourishes in that area, or if it's a middle school, what's their mascot or something like that. And sometimes something of that alone will do it. I wrote a piece some years ago for a middle school, and I asked them what their mascot was. And they said the Mustangs. So I just started Googling Mustangs and came up with a couple of pretty, that just started the whole idea. Found out about these little Mustang horses that are on this Outer Banks of North Carolina in this place called Shackelford Banks. They're still there and there's no humans. They were lost when Spanish galleons sunk and the horses swam ashore. And they've stayed small because they've not been bred. That fascinated me. So I wrote a piece called Shackelford Banks, based on these little ponies.
Did you embed anything from Mustang Sally in there?
No, I didn't. I didn't, but I might have. I might have. But so sometimes it's something like that. Sometimes I did a thing for the Georgia Phi Beta Mu a few years ago, and so I just started Googling Georgia tunes, and come to find out there really aren't any that are public domain. There's a lot of Georgia across the pond, that Georgia tunes, but not, there's Georgia on My Mind and stuff like that, but those aren't public domain. Just trying to get a germ of an idea. That usually is what helps. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was writing a piece and I was really stuck, and I was doing a clinic in somewhere in Texas, and some band parent picked me up at the airport and was taking me to wherever the honor band was. And she said, "What are you working on?" I said, I'm trying to get this new piece done, and I'm just stuck. And she goes, "Well, you got to start with a note." I'm like, "Well, yeah, you're right. That helped. You got to start with a note. Sometimes that's all it takes.
So I trust you're sitting. Go ahead.
No, then you write a second note, and somebody goes, "Well, how's it going? How's it doing better?" "Well, I got 2 notes now."
And I trust you're sitting at a keyboard during this process?
I do. I'm not one that I can write without it, but it's so much easier for me with it. So yeah, I'll do all my writing at the keyboard.
So
Right
are you a pencil and paper kind of guy, or are you using notational software? And
Well, of course, I was forever a pencil and paper kind of guy because that's all we had. When the notation software happened, I've gradually moved over to it, to the point now where I do everything on the software. I don't use pencil and paper anymore. Now, a lot of my composer friends are like, well, then you're not really doing it right. And they may be right, but I find that I can sketch on notation software as easily as I could sketch on pencil and paper.
Mhm.
You know, if I don't like something in that voice, I can just move it to another voice, just like I could on pencil and paper. So yeah, I'm doing it all now. And I look back at the reams and reams of scores that I have in this closet behind me of all this pencil and paper. And like, how did we do that? And then we had to write parts. How did we even get through that? But somehow we did, because that's all there was. It's so much easier now to be prolific.
But it takes time for you to get, I mean, you got to learn the craft with pencil and paper, correct?
That's right.
I mean, I don't think you can just start, I'm going to learn how to compose it. I'm going to go with Finale or Sibelius or whatever the latest software program is.
Well, the kids do that though. They do start that way now. But luckily, there's a lot of theory people and a lot of composing teachers at college that make them do, you know, the first several projects with pencil and paper.
Yeah. Well, Jay, you have an incredible list of entities and events that you have been a part of. You've written for, including the Olympics 3 times, and U.S. Marine Band, and you've done so much. You know, Drum and Bugle Corps, Garfield, or the Cadets. You've done Blast, and any of those stick out as being some of the most memorable?
Wow. Well, they're all memorable. They're all just great moments that I had the ability to be a small part. But I don't know, probably the greatest single one is writing the transcriptions of the music of John Williams for 2 of the anniversary concerts of the Marine Band, Kennedy Center, with John Williams conducting. So I had a chance to spend a week with the other collaborators, Paul Lavender and Stephen Bullough, the people that wrote the transcriptions, and then with John Williams conducting in the Marine Band and Sousa Band Hall for days of rehearsal and then the performance. I don't think I can ever get over that. You know, we're in the hall. The Marine Band is 15 feet away. John Williams is 10 feet away. We have all these white tables, long tables in front of us, like we're sight reading judges, with all these scores open. And we're hearing Star Wars with him conducting it. And it's like, it was an out of body experience. It's just, and then to interact with him and be able to talk to him about the process. You know, it was the scariest moment of my life and the most thrilling. You know, we would sit there and they'd be playing, and my biggest fear was he'd stop and turn around and go, "Which one of you did this one?" You know, that kind of thing. What were you thinking at letter D? You know, but that never happened. But it was just a fantastic experience. But the others have been too. All the great years in drum corps have been fantastic, and then how that turned into what now is Blast, and being involved with them for all those years too as well. The level of professionalism and creativity. It's just been an honor to be a small part of all these things. I wish, I've had the bands at the Olympics have played my arrangements of the John Williams themes. My only concern is, except for 96, I was never there to hear them. I wish I would have been there. But that's whatever. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you're in John Williams' presence, it's a whole another world. I mean, I remember being with you and Paul Lavender at the Tournament of Roses when John Williams was the Grand Marshal.
That's right.
And he was rehearsing the Michigan and USC bands in his arrangement of the national anthem. And that was like so cool for me to just kind of sit there and he's rehearsing and he's stopping and he's turning around. He's asking you guys questions like, well, you know, are you hearing enough trumpet? How about that was just so fascinating for me.
It was crazy. And, you know, and then riding in the vans to all the events with him, you know, Rose Bowl 1, was the car the Honda SUV that he drove around, and I'm tucked in the back, and it was an unbelievable experience. And every time the car doors opened, as you know, and he stepped out, there were fanfares played. There trumpets playing fanfares. It was like, and I'm like crawling out the back. Who are these guys? Who's this guy?
Yeah, the president of the Tournament of Roses, Mike Riffey, passed a few years ago, and he was such a great guy, and he's just such a great music lover, and he took really good care of us during that week.
He did. That was fun. We had a good time. We had some meals together and had a great time.
Yep, and a few laughs. So, Jay, where do you see the future of bands heading?
Well, I wish I knew. I will say I think the pandemic has changed the way we think about a lot of things. We can now do stuff that we never would have even thought about doing in terms of virtual learning. And that's going to be an advantage to us down the road, I think, as opposed to there'll be no snow days anymore, right? Those are done. Yep. You'll now be e-learning. And because we found out ways that we can do this and we can still be successful. I think we are going to rebound in terms of numbers. And I think the enthusiasm for band is not lost at all. I think it's going to remain strong. I see high school bands and college band programs getting stronger at the top level for sure. When I watch the marching bands from the bowl games, how great the college bands are. When I go to BOA and see how competitive and creative those bands are, I have nothing but hope for the future.
That's great. So any advice for someone who's listening, wants to be a band director or wants to be an arranger or composer? Any advice for them?
Yeah, do it. Do both. I've had the honor of being able to write and to conduct and teach all these years. And it's kept me interested in both. I don't find myself just humped over the piano playing all day or just going out doing clinics conducting all day. I'm doing both things. I think you can do both. I think it's enriching to do both and get as many performances of your pieces as possible. I have a lot of young composers and arrangers ask me, how do I get into the business? Have other people champion you. Get your music performed. Have other people go, you need this man or this woman to be one of your published people. That's how you do it. You don't send a portfolio of your works to a publisher and go, I'm good, take me. They're not going to do it. There's just too many people that do that. Have other people go, you need to go after this person because they are that good. And that's how I think if you'll ask most composers today, that's how it happened with them.
Any final thoughts you want to share?
Only that it's been a blast to do this. Reminiscing is always fun. And maybe to some of your listeners, I'm just the old curmudgeon, but it's been quite a ride. I feel so blessed that I've been able to be a part of this for 40 plus years and a significant contributor to it. I hope that continues. I'm working on projects now. I'm trying to finish up a commission in the next 2 or 3 days. So I'm burning the candle at both ends, especially, when I get home from school or early in the morning before I leave. So it's still exciting to me. It's still fun for me. And I hope it is forever.
Jay Bocook, you're the best, buddy. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Charlie, thank you for having me. And let's get together as soon as we can.
Jay Bocook is another one of those people who I just love chatting with. His matter-of-factness is simply refreshing. Jay is one of those rare folks who tells it like it is and can do so and put a smile on your face. His advice about doing the job and then getting others to notice your work and recommend you is spot-on advice. Jay, thanks for your friendship, and thanks for the many great arrangements and compositions you have given to the band world over the past 40-plus years. I hope you will continue to grace our profession for many, many more. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. We'll be back with more great conversations, but for now, thank you for listening. Please tell your friends and colleagues about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. So until the next time, this is Charlie Mangini saying, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.